Some guys find out their wife is stepping out on them and they just crumble. They weep, they beg, they drunk dial their buddies at 2 a.m., spouting things like, I just don't get how she could do this to me. I'm not that guy. Welcome back to my channel. Grab your favorite snack, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to keep their hands clean. They just made the wrong call. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Jack Cole, and the night my wife tried to hand my life over to another man like a bag of cheap leftovers, I just smiled, poured another glass of Cabernet, and spoke a single flawless sentence in French that made a Wall Street heavyweight's blood run completely cold. But before we hit that climax, let me rewind. Because if you don't grasp where I came from, you won't understand why everything that followed was executed with zero hesitation. It started on a Wednesday, which, if you really think about it, is the absolute worst day of the week to watch your life implode. It lacks the theatricality of a Friday night or the gloom of a rainy Sunday. It's just hump day. I'd had a brutal grind at work, back-to-back Zoom calls with clients, and a stale mug of drip coffee that had been sitting on my desk so long it had basically filed for bankruptcy. And my wife, Chloe, was leaning against our kitchen island with that specific, calculated smile she deployed whenever she was about to ask for a favor. Chloe was stunning in the way a hurricane is stunning, the kind of force of nature you admire from the porch right up until it rips your roof off. Jack, she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey, Pierce wants to take us out to dinner this Friday. He says he really wants to get to know the guy keeping his top earner grounded. Pierce was her boss. Pierce Sterling, managing partner at Sterling Hayes Investments. The kind of Boston elite whose tailored suits cost more than my first mortgage. I'd been hearing the guy's name for 2 solid years. Heard it dropped casually. Heard it when Chloe walked through the door flushed and breathless from late quarter strategy sessions. Heard it in the exact way her eyes darted to the floor whenever she mentioned him. I looked up from my dual monitors. Sure, I said. Sounds awesome. And I smiled. Chloe blinked. I guarantee she was bracing for pushback, a heavy sigh, a jealous comment, maybe a territorial argument. But I just flashed a grin and went right back to my spreadsheets. What Chloe didn't know, what she couldn't possibly fathom, was that I had been praying for this dinner invitation for a very, very long time. Here is the context you need. I was raised in a speck of a town in rural Georgia, the kind of sweaty, one-stoplight place where everyone goes to the same high school. Nobody knows who your dad is. And the Waffle House is the center of the local economy. My mother, Sarah Cole, raised me entirely on her own. No excuses, no complaints. She worked graveyard shifts at a distribution warehouse and days at a local diner, yet somehow still found the bandwidth to drill me on flashcards before I went to sleep. She never breathed a word about my father. Not once. Not until the week her body started giving out. I was 32 years old, sitting beside her bed at Emory University Hospital, gripping a hand that had grown so frail I was terrified of breaking it. The monitors hummed their sterile robotic tune, and my mom shifted her head to look at me with eyes that were terrifyingly sharp for someone in her condition. Jack, she rasped, her voice paper-thin. There's a lot I should have told you. Mom, take it easy. You don't have to talk. She didn't lose her edge, even at the end. She silenced me with a look. Your father's name is Arthur Sterling. I froze, completely still. He was a visiting professor at the university down here. We were young. He was charming. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second. When I told him I was late, he handed me an envelope of cash and a Greyhound ticket back to my hometown. He told me if I ever reached out, his family's lawyers would bury me. She turned her head, locking eyes with me. He has a son up in Massachusetts, Jack. A legitimate one, named Pierce. He's running the family empire now. Arthur is elderly, his health is failing, and word is he just opened up his estate to rewrite the trust. The IV monitors kept buzzing. I'm not giving you this so you go kick up dirt, she wheezed. But if the dirt ever comes looking for you, I want you to know exactly what kind of leverage you're holding. She passed away 5 days later. I spent the following 8 months doing what I am literally paid to do. Auditing. Professionally, I'm a forensic accountant for federal contractors. That's a corporate way of saying I dig up the hidden assets that arrogant people think they've buried. I am exceptional at pulling threads, and Arthur Sterling had left an entire tapestry to pull. Here's the breakdown. Arthur Sterling was on his way out. Liver cancer. Late stage. His golden boy heir, Pierce, was slated to inherit the controlling stake in Sterling Hayes Investments, valued at roughly $850 million. But Arthur, acting out of some late-in-life cocktail of guilt and defiance, had ordered his legal team to restructure the trust to include a shadow heir. Me. Arthur had put a high-end private investigator on my mother's trail, only to learn she had just passed. But he also learned her kidney was very much alive and kicking in the Northeast. That made me a massive liability to Pierce Sterling's inheritance. The million-dollar question. Did Pierce know about me? Then, 5 months into my discreet digging, Chloe waltzed into our living room and announced she'd been transferred directly under a new boss, a guy named Pierce. I let that piece of data marinate, long enough to ask myself if Boston was small enough for a coincidence like that, long enough to realize it was a mathematical impossibility. So I played the only hand that made sense. I played dumb, I smiled, and I waited. Friday rolled around, dripping in old money. The restaurant was nestled in Beacon Hill, the sort of establishment that doesn't put dollar signs on the menu because if you're looking at the price, the maitre d' will quietly ask you to leave. Mahogany walls, dim chandeliers, and a waitstaff that glided over the hardwood like ghosts. Pierce was already at the booth when we walked in. He stood up the second he spotted Chloe. The micro-expressions, the slight tilt of his hips, the heavy, lingering warmth in his eyes before he threw up his professional mask, gave away the entire affair in a single glance. He was broad-shouldered, rocking a salt and pepper fade and a jawline that belonged on a billboard. He shot his hand out toward me with an aggressively confident grin. Jack. Man, I've heard nothing but incredible things. His tone was smooth, polished in Ivy League boardrooms. Likewise, I'm sure, I replied. His eyes screamed, asterisk. You pathetic, clueless beta, asterisk. I gripped his hand tight and beamed back. My eyes said, asterisk. Just keep talking, pal. Asterisk. We sat down. We ordered. The banter flowed the way it always does when two people are putting on an off-Broadway play for a third. Excessive chuckling, heavy eye contact between them, actively dodging any topic of substance. Chloe was glowing. She grazed Pierce's knuckles twice during a joke. She touched my side of the table exactly 0 times. I sliced into my medium-rare filet mignon. I asked Pierce boring questions about the Dow Jones. I kept the Napa Cabernet flowing. And then, right in the dead space between the main course and the dessert pitch, Chloe casually rested her palm flat against her lower stomach. It was incredibly subtle, the kind of maternal instinct a woman acts on without realizing her body is doing it. But I'm an auditor. I noticed the decimals. Pierce caught it too. His eyes darted to her waist. Chloe gave him a millimeter of a nod. Then, she looked at me flashing that radiant, perfectly rehearsed wife smile, and said to Pierce in fluent French, "Relax. The fool is so excited about the baby. He thinks it's his genes. He's going to fund your kid's college without a clue." She let out a soft giggle. Pierce let out a long breath, the tension melting out of his posture. I just sat there, swirling the deep red wine in my glass, grinning like a golden retriever who had no idea what country he was in. I let the silence hang in the air for exactly 5 seconds. Then I placed my glass on the coaster, shifted my weight forward, and looked Pierce dead in the retinas. In the absolute sharpest, most impeccably accented French I could muster, I said, "Your father sends his regards, Pierce." The blood vanished from his face so violently I thought he was going to need a paramedic. Chloe's fingers locked up like rigor mortis on the tablecloth, and 3 miles away, in a VIP suite at Mass General Hospital, an old man named Arthur was waiting to hear from the bastard son he'd just tracked down about an empire that was no longer a guaranteed inheritance. I picked my wine back up. Switching back to English, I said cheerfully, "So, are we feeling the cheesecake? Or should we just get the check? Asterisk, we're just getting to the good part. If you're hooked, do me a solid. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It takes 2 seconds, and it's what allows me to keep bringing you these deep dives. Thanks, guys. Asterisk. There's a unique brand of silence that actually carries physical mass. not the peaceful quiet of a snowy morning. I'm talking about a suffocating vacuum where you can practically hear the gears grinding inside someone's skull as they try to salvage their reality. That vacuum swallowed our table for about 10 seconds. I kept a mental timer. Pierce Sterling, Wall Street Titan, was staring at me like I was a golden retriever that had just quoted Shakespeare. His jaw was literally slacked. A guy with Pierce's pedigree probably hadn't felt genuine panic since prep school. Watching his brain short-circuit was, hands down, a top 3 moment of my entire life. Chloe was a totally different train wreck. She was gaping at me like the gravity in the room had just reversed. Her hand was still glued to the table. In the span of 5 seconds, I watched her cycle through pure shock, wild confusion, blind rage, utter terror, and finally, the agonizing realization that she had bet her entire life on the wrong horse. I took a sip of my cab. "Jack," she whispered, "this Opus 1 is really singing tonight," I noted casually, tapping the stem of my glass. "Pierce, are you usually a Napa guy? Or do you lean more toward the European imports? You give off a Bordeaux vibe." "Jack?" Chloe's pitch skyrocketed. "What? What did you just say to him?" I turned to her, painting on a masterpiece of utter confusion. "I asked if we should grab dessert. You spaced out on me. The acoustics in here are terrible." Pierce finally swallowed hard. Now let's be clear. Pierce Sterling was not a moron. Entitled? 100%. Arrogant enough to believe his trust fund made him bulletproof? Definitely. But he wasn't stupid. And in the time it took me to take a sip, his survival instincts kicked in. He lifted his water glass, took a calculated sip to buy a moment. And when his eyes met mine again, the cocky alpha male routine had evaporated. What replaced it was cold, calculating ice. "You're fluent in French," he stated flatly. "Since high school," I replied breezily. "My mom insisted it would open doors." Turns out, she was a visionary. Chloe let out this awful, breathless sound, the kind of choked noise a person makes right before they have a total psychological meltdown. Jack, we, this was just a Chloe. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't snap. I just said her name with the cold precision of a judge reading a sentence. She snapped her mouth shut. I pivoted back to the boss. "Your old man's name is Arthur Sterling," I said, adopting the tone you'd use to discuss the Patriots' defensive line. "He's holed up at Mass General, East Wing, room 412, diagnosed with liver failure about a year ago. Stage 4, which I'm guessing put a massive ticking clock on the Sterling Trust Fund for a guy in your shoes." Pierce didn't twitch a muscle. "He authorized his legal team to draft the trust amendments 9 months ago," I kept going. "The firm on State Street, phenomenal lawyers, by the way, pushed the ink in early spring. I'm betting that's exactly when you got the memo. And I'm betting that's the exact same week you suddenly took a massive professional interest in my wife." The tea light candle flickered. Chloe let out a whimper. I slumped back against the leather booth, looser than I'd been in a decade. Carrying a nuke in your back pocket gets heavy. Finally putting it on the table feels like taking off a weighted vest. "I couldn't figure out your exact angle at first," I mused. "Maybe you were pumping Chloe for intel on me. Maybe you figured getting close to my inner circle gave you some kind of emotional leverage." I ran through a few scenarios, but I also used the last 8 months to pull the SEC filings on your hedge fund. Your corporate shell games are sloppy, Pierce. There are 3 offshore entities tied to your name that the Department of Justice would have an absolute field day dissecting. Pierce slowly lowered his hands to his lap. "I'm not here to shake you down," I told him, and I was dead serious. "This isn't a shakedown. Tonight was just a formal introduction, the real one." I waved my hand between the 3 of us. "So, since the cards are officially on the table, do we want to talk like adults?" What unfolded next is burned into my retinas. Chloe broke down. Not the pretty, single-tear movie crying. I mean ugly, hyperventilating, visceral sobbing. The kind of breakdown that happens when the fake persona you've been wearing shatters into a million pieces. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving, and for a split second, I felt the exact emotion I had spent 8 months aggressively burying. Because here's the brutal reality. I had loved her. Deeply. The kind of unpretentious love that hits you when you're eating cold pizza on the kitchen floor at 1 a.m. laughing until your ribs hurt. I loved her. And somewhere along the line, the foundation cracked, and instead of going to therapy or talking to me, she sought an upgrade. And that upgrade was currently staring me down in a booth that cost $1,000 to sit in. I stared at her shaking frame. Then I looked at Pierce. "The baby," I said quietly. "Is it actually yours?" Silence. "Chloe," I said. "Yes or no?" She dragged her hands down her ruined makeup. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know." I gave a slow nod. I had prepped for a yes. I had prepped for a no. What I wasn't prepped for was the sheer pathetic reality of I don't know. I grabbed my ice water, took a long drag, and set it down. All right. Pierce hadn't said a word to comfort her. That told me everything I needed to know about the guy. If he genuinely gave a damn about Chloe, he would have grabbed her hand or tried to shield her. Instead, Pierce was doing the math, assessing collateral damage. "What's your price?" Pierce finally asked. His voice was steady. "I'll give him that." "That's the wrong question," I said. "You didn't do this just to blow up a date night," he countered, leaning in. "You've been sitting on this. You built a trap." "What do you want?" I held his gaze. "I want an hour with Arthur." A muscle twitched in Pierce's jaw. It was the first authentic emotion he'd shown all night. Fear. Pure, unadulterated panic. He masked it instantly, but it was too late. "That's impossible," he stated. "He's my dad." I shrugged. "He doesn't even know who you are." "Don't insult my intelligence, Pierce. He hired a private eye down in Georgia a year and a half ago. He knows my mom is gone. He knows I'm up here. Why else do you think the trust is being rewritten?" I let that hang. The issue isn't if Arthur knows I breathe oxygen. The issue is if he croaks before the ink dries on his new will. Pierce was practically grinding his molars to dust. "I don't want your money," I said firmly. "I don't care about the capital firm. I care about walking into a hospital room and demanding the truth from an old man who abandoned my mother. Period. So, Pierce, the only thing you need to decide right now is if you're going to facilitate that introduction quietly, or if I'm going to make your life extremely complicated with the feds." The wind howled outside the restaurant windows. Boston in the late fall is brutal. Nobody moved an inch. And then, Pierce did something that completely threw me. He chuckled. A dry, humorless exhale. The laugh of a poker player who just got rivered and respects the hustle. "Your mother," he murmured. "Sarah Cole." I didn't blink. My dad talked about her, his voice softened, losing the Wall Street edge. Only when he was a few scotches deep. Said she was the most brilliant woman he ever crossed paths with. Said buying that bus ticket was the biggest mistake of his entire life. The booth was dead silent. "He has no idea what kind of damage he did," I said. "No," Pierce agreed. "He really doesn't." We just stared at each other. Two sons. Same blood. Completely different tax brackets. Navigating a disaster that neither of us had technically started. Chloe had stopped sobbing and was just watching us, paralyzed. I reached into my blazer, pulled out a stark white business card, and slid it across the mahogany. "My direct line," I said. "Set it up before the weekend." I threw a $50 bill on the table for the valet, stood up, and buttoned my jacket. "The steaks were fantastic," I noted. "Have a great night." And I walked out into the freezing New England air, leaving two shell-shocked people trapped in a booth with the wreckage of their own decisions. Asterisk. If you've made it this far and want more content like this, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. 90% of you watch these without subbing, but it's what keeps the lights on around here. Thank you. Asterisk. There's a dirty little secret about revenge. The movies lie to you. It isn't a massive explosion. You don't walk away in slow motion. Real payback is administrative. It's sitting on explosive data for months while your stomach acid eats itself. And when the hammer finally drops, you don't feel victorious. You just feel drained. Pierce called my cell on a Monday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen island, nursing a black coffee, auditing a defense contractor's ledger. "Jack," he said. The corporate bravado was completely stripped away. He just sounded exhausted. "I talked to the charge nurse. Wednesday, 3 p.m., Mass General. Your name is cleared at the front desk." A heavy pause. "He's deteriorating, Jack. Just brace yourself." "I know," I said. "Jack?" He paused. I need to know you aren't going in there to finish him off. I told you, I replied smoothly. I just want the truth. Yeah, he sighed. I believe you. We disconnected. I want to touch on Chloe for a second. Not the woman shaking in the booth. The woman I actually fell for. We met at an industry mixer in Austin. She was lingering by the ice sculpture, clutching a gin and tonic, and looking incredibly entertained by the whole corporate circus. I walked up and told her she looked like a shark observing an aquarium. She laughed a real gut-deep laugh, and we talked until the bartenders kicked us out. We tied the knot a year and a half later. I'm telling you this so you know I didn't marry an enemy. I married a partner. But somewhere between her corporate climb and my obsessive auditing, the Wi-Fi disconnected. We drifted, and she filled the void with her boss. Wednesday arrived. Mass General is a massive, sprawling complex that tries really hard to hide the fact that people die there every day. Fake plants, soft jazz in the elevators. It doesn't work. I checked in, and a tired-looking orderly badged me into the East Wing. Room 412. He pointed down the hall. I stood outside the heavy wooden door for 20 seconds. Try standing outside the room of the ghost who haunted your mother's entire existence and see if your heart rate stays steady. I pushed the door open. Arthur Sterling was a fraction of the man I'd built up in my head. In my mind, he was a towering villain. In reality, he was a 7-4-year-old guy, drowning in hospital blankets, hooked up to a dozen IV bags, swiping weekly at a Sudoku puzzle on an iPad. But when he looked up, his eyes were predatory. Sharp, terrifyingly lucid. He stared at me for a solid minute. Then his raspy voice cut the silence. You have your mother's jawline. I locked up. Pull up a chair, son, he wheezed. I didn't break down. But hearing the word son triggered a weird, involuntary release in my ribs. Like I'd been holding a breath for 3 decades. I sat. We talked for 3 hours. I won't give you the transcript, because some ghosts deserve to stay in that room. But he told me about the spring of '90 at the university. About my mom ripping apart his lecture on supply-side economics in front of an entire auditorium, and how he fell hard for her right there. He confessed to being a coward, a rich kid, terrified of being cut off by his own father if he brought home a working-class pregnant girl. I have possessed immense wealth my entire life, Arthur murmured, staring at the ceiling tiles. And I have used it to make a staggering number of cowardly choices. You don't owe me an apology, I said. I know I don't, he coughed. I'm making one because I want to. When you're staring down the barrel, you stop doing things for PR and start doing them for your soul. He shifted his weight and looked at me. Tell me about my other son. Tell me about Pierce. I stiffened. What exactly do you want to know? Arthur reached over to his bedside table. His hands were trembling, but he grabbed a thick, manila envelope and rested it on his chest. Pierce is aggressive, Arthur noted. He's grown the firm, but he is currently the subject of a massive, sealed Department of Justice wire fraud probe. He's been cooking the books to inflate investor returns. His legal team is scrambling to keep a lid on it. Arthur locked eyes with me. Do you see the chessboard now, Jack? I saw it instantly. Pierce wasn't just sleeping with Chloe for kicks. He was building a firewall. A federal auditor with a flawless record, married to his top lieutenant, brought into the Sterling family orbit. I wasn't just a threat to his inheritance. I was a potential get-out-of-jail-free card if the feds ever raided the office. He doesn't know that you know about the DOJ, I realized. No, Arthur said. And the trust? The amendment is ironclad. Whether Pierce goes to federal prison or not, you are my blood. The money is split. He pushed the manila envelope toward me. This is a sworn affidavit, witnessed by my partners. It explains everything about your mother, my failures, and your legitimacy. Use it however you see fit. Why drop the bomb about the DOJ? I asked, taking the envelope. He closed his eyes. Because right now, you are the only person on this earth who doesn't have a financial incentive to lie to me. I walked out of Mass Gen at 6 p.m. I sat in my truck in the parking garage, staring at the envelope on the passenger seat. My phone blew up. Missed call from Pierce. 3 frantic texts from Chloe. And an email from a DOJ whistleblower hotline that I'd bookmarked weeks ago. Here is how I closed out the board. I dialed Chloe first. Are you safe? I asked. Jack, she sobbed. I'm at my sister's. Jack, I'm. Listen to me. I interrupted. Whatever the DNA says, that kid didn't ask for any of this. I'm not going to scorch the earth on an innocent baby. Understand? She cried so hard she dropped the phone. When she picked it back up, she just whispered, I am so, so sorry. I know, I said, and we hung up. We were done, but the toxicity was gone. It was just over. Then I called Pierce. I saw him, I said. How is he? Pierce asked nervously. Fading, I said flatly. Pierce, I know about the DOJ probe. Dead silence on the line. Your dad gave me the file. Now listen to me very carefully. On Monday morning, you are going to call your legal team. You are going to authorize a full voluntary cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutors. You do not wait for the raid. You self-report. You know how this works if you hand them the evidence. You dodge the maximum sentence. Jack, Pierce stammered. Why are you helping me? You could bury me. I watched a Boston subway train rattle over the tracks in the distance. Because, I told him, you're the only brother I've got. Arthur Sterling flatlined on a Wednesday, which, fittingly, remains the absolute worst day of the week. His will was executed exactly as promised. Pierce maintained operational control of the firm, pending his plea deal with the feds, which he actually followed through on. I received a letter, a formalized apology, and a financial stake that means I'll never have to audit another spreadsheet unless I want to. Chloe and I finalized the divorce quickly and quietly. In the spring, she gave birth to a boy. We ran the DNA. He's mine. We named him Luke. He has his mother's smile and my mother's unbreakable jawline, and absolutely zero concept of how chaotic his entry into the world was. I'll tell him when he's older. All of it. People always ask how I kept my blood pressure so low at that steakhouse. The truth? I wasn't numb. I was just raised right. Sarah Cole spent 32 years proving that the ultimate flex in an impossible situation is simply refusing to let it break you. She carried a secret that should have ruined her, and she smiled through it. I carried mine for 8 months, and it bought me an empire. She won. My name is Jack Cole. I lost a wife, found a brother, buried a father, and met my son. And on a Wednesday night, a woman I loved tried to treat my life like a disposable napkin. She didn't know I spoke French. She didn't know I tracked offshore accounts. But the ultimate tragedy was that she didn't realize the guy sitting across from her, sipping an overpriced Cabernet, had already checkmated the entire room.